Shalom family. So massive outcry about the whole stopping and seemingly dismantling of USAID at the moment, with Elon Musk being involved and Trump letting them go for it and do this thing. And there's been a lot of outcry specifically by those involved in USAID and the Democrats, obviously, screaming and crying about the impact this is going to have on so many places. And I am sympathetic to that, because South Africa is directly in the crosshairs of this whole situation as well. And to give you an example, a large part of that US aid for South Africa would affect the whole HIV/AIDS community, where it was supplying funds for antiretroviral drugs and things like that that are desperately needed for a nation that has such a large amount of people suffering from AIDS and HIV at this stage of the game. So the threat, well, they're closing doors everywhere here in the country now, and the threat that those drugs will not be available because there is no funding for that is a very real scary thing. So again, I understand that, and I see it's a very real thing. I'm dealing with people that actually need those kind of drugs, but it brings us back to, why are the countries that the US is supplying all this aid to not resolving or working on these issues themselves? Now, in South Africa, for example, using my home country, the government speaks about creating a whole new city and spending millions of dollars of this and spending money here and doing all these grand projects. Why don't you pull back on that, take some of that money, because it would be a small portion, and supply everything they need for ARVs, for example, that the US is doing, and resolve that, because that's a real people issue. And then once you've resolved that suffering and those issues, then maybe look what other projects we can work on, instead of relying on America paying for this need, an actual need, while we blow money on these couldn't be nice projects. You understand? And this is the same for every country in the world. Why have you not focused on working on those things yourself? Because a lot of money by your leadership is being spent in other projects that are not really necessary or shouldn't be a focus point. But let's have a look at the articles and why USAID has come under fire so greatly now recently. So starting immediately, we've got the USAID freeze sending shockwaves around the world. Okay, so Nepal's Secretary of Ministry of Health says, no surprise to us, we really did not expect all the programs to stop, however. He told DW the phone call came earlier that week announcing an end to all US-funded programs in Nepal. US President Donald Trump signed the executive order suspending US development aid on his first day in office. Funds were frozen for 90 days while his administration reviewed whether projects are aligned with US interests, making the country safer, stronger, and more prosperous. So there's nothing wrong with what he did. He's taking over from a corrupt administration that was doing everything wrong, specifically with finances, and not thinking about the American citizen first. So he freezes everything so they can look at it and see what needs to be cut and not cut. And that's not what the left wanted, and those pulling the evil strings wanted. So the White House press secretary Carolyn Leavitt accused the previous administration under Joe Biden of spending money like drunken sailors, and said Trump would be a better manager of state funds. Correct. The US is the world's largest donor of developmental aid, said the political scientist Stephen Klingerbiel from the German Institute of Development and Sustainability. According to official US figures, development aid amounted to $68 billion in 2023 alone, right? And it got systematically worse from therein. But they can't supply enough support or money to victims of hurricanes in America right now. Explain that to me, and that is why these kind of things are being looked at. Some viewed the freeze of US foreign aid as a chance. Let us be self-reliant, said former Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta at a health conference in the Kenyan coastal city of Mombasa. Why are you crying? It's not your government. It's not your country. He has no reason to give you anything. You don't pay taxes in America. This is a wake-up call to you to say, okay, what are we going to do to help ourselves? This guy's head is screwed on straight. He's 100% correct, and he's handling the situation perfectly, unlike many other leaders. We definitely know that this is the US people's taxpayers' money, said Porel from the Nepali Health Ministry. We know it is hard-earned money, but we in third world countries like Nepal definitely would like to continue using their resources properly. He expressed hope that the US-funded project in this country would resume after 90 days, and saying it would help the world and thus help the US if they can keep spending the money. All right, so I still agree with the Kenyan. He's 100% on point. How can we help ourselves? USAID, let's look into it, gave Gates, Soros, and the WEF billions of dollars for their initiatives. Gates and Soros have more money they know what to do with, but they received USAID to the tune of billions of dollars. Billions of dollars. The World Economic Forum, which is a bunch of old rich people flying around in their jets discussing the fate of humanity in secret, received billions of dollars from USAID. Do you see the problem here? Do you understand why it's frozen and why they need to drill into it? The United States, through USAID, has been a major contributor to Bill Gates' International Vaccine Initiative, GAVI, since its inception in 2000. In 2020, USAID announced a commitment of $1.16 billion to GAVI for the fiscal years 2020 to 2023. More recently, the US pledged $1.58 billion to GAVI over the next 5 years for the upcoming replenishment period. These contributions combined exceed $2 billion. GAVI was one of the top recipients of USAID grants in 2024, according to the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons. The association shared a screenshot indicating that USAID gave GAVI $4 billion for 2024 alone. And now you wonder why Bill Gates is front page news screaming about the effect that this freeze on USAID is going to have on all these poor people out there. Because he's number one in the list of frozen aid for him. Hello. In 2017, the conservative think tank Heritage Foundation claimed that George Soros Open Society Foundations, OSF, has been the primary implementer of USAID's foreign aid since at least 2009. And when you dig into that and see how the money was funneled to Soros for all of his work and movements in various countries that were destabilized. From 2013 to 2022, USAID invested $26 million in multi-year agreements, according to the WEF's website, for the World Economic Forum. Again, now you understand why it's frozen and why they need to look into what the heck is going on here. USAID has been funding over 6,000 journalists worldwide across 1,000 platforms. Yesterday's report that the US government has been funding outlets such as Politico, the Associated Press, the BBC, shouldn't the UK be funding the BBC? Raised more questions than it answered. The US government has effectively been propping up regime-friendly media, which includes 90% of all reports out of Ukraine. Wow, interesting, hey? If you needed any more proof that you should be careful about Western media. Liberals and globalists flip out after Trump's USA freeze. The foreign aid agency USAID morphed into a slush fund for the deep state to spread wokeism and spark revolutions in countries that resist. President Trump had enough of it, and his administration is moving to dismantle the program. USAID expenditures over the last few years. So let's have a look at some of these, because I mean, shame, they should continue, right? $20 million on a Sesame Street show for Iraq. $56 million to boost Egyptian and Tunisia tourism. But Egypt won't help with the Gaza relocation in the meantime while they rebuild Gaza. No, absolutely not. But they can accept $56 million to boost their tourism and bring funds into their country. $40 million to build schools in Jordan. The king of Jordan won't help either. $150,000 for Korean kids to visit DC. $11 million to tell the Vietnamese to stop burning trash. Shouldn't Vietnam be telling the Vietnamese to stop burning trash? $1.5 million to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in Serbia's workplaces and business communities. Shouldn't that be Serbia's job? $70,000 for production of a DEI musical in Ireland. $2.5 million for electric vehicles for Vietnam. $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia. $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru. Do you understand why, whether you like Trump or hate Trump, this is definitely a brilliant thing to be digging into and stopping and reallocating those funds to help Americans who have lost everything in disaster after disaster from natural disasters, and actually uplift them and get them back on their feet, and help Americans who don't have jobs and sort the country out and strengthen the borders and fix things that should have been fixed long time ago. Instead, all this money was going to rich old billionaires and woke programs across the world, and paying people to pick up trash in their own countries. I'm sorry, but that is not America's problem, is it? That's just my humble opinion. And so, while the left loses their minds and the elites run around and scream and blame and say how terrible this is, remember these facts that are coming out that they're trying to keep quiet. Obviously, they're going to be upset that these things are being stopped. Just the chaos before the storm blows into full frenzy and the tribulation bears down on everyone. Coming down the tracks, we can clearly see the headlights, we can hear the train, we can see the smoke. It is almost upon us, and we are not destined for wrath. We are out of here soon. Shalom.